Nuclear genocide, the threat and the ceasefire. This is an AI reading. Given the mainstream structural filters that reflexively whitewash the crimes of the good guys, us, by doctrinal fiat, we have often wondered how the great and the good of corporate politics and media would react if the US or Israel had ever decided to use nuclear weapons. Could they, even then, break out of their lockstep deference to power, reclaim their souls, and say something humanly honest about that ultimate moral abomination? This week, it looked like we might find out. On Easter Sunday, Trump posted a message on social media threatening to destroy Iran's civilian infrastructure. Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the fucking Strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah. President Donald J. Trump. Afterwards, Trump told Fox News there was a good chance a deal would be made on Monday, but he was considering blowing everything up and taking over the oil if a deal to end the war was not reached quickly. The threat followed Trump's April 2nd bombing of Iran's unfinished B-1 bridge, 40 kilometers west of Tehran, designed to be the highest bridge in the Middle East, and his associated threat to bring it back to the Stone Ages where it belongs. For Britons going to bed on Tuesday evening, there seemed a real prospect that we might wake up to news that nuclear weapons had been used for the first time since the incineration of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. Trump had, after all, posted this apocalyptic prediction on Truth Social. A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will. Of course, nothing Trump says can be taken at face value. His clear devotion to the madman theory of international relations means he has to wildly threaten with the biggest stick in one hand, while offering carrots in the other to achieve a deal. But many of us felt deeply anxious for the fate of Iranians being terrorized this way, facing the ultimate horror of a nuclear holocaust. Even if Trump's threats had been a sham, Iran might have preemptively struck at Israel's nuclear and desalination plants, triggering a nuclear response. Iran has anyway suffered grievously. According to the Iranian authorities, around 81,000 civilian sites have so far been damaged by US-Israeli bombing, including 61,000 homes, 19,000 commercial sites, 275 medical centers, and nearly 500 schools. Sarah Smith of the BBC described Trump's threat that a whole civilization will die tonight as merely brutal. Smith's breathtakingly bland conclusion. But this latest post does not indicate that he is optimistic about reaching an agreement before his deadline tonight. Much worse appeared elsewhere on the BBC website. Gonche Habibazad, a senior reporter at BBC Persian at just 27 years of age, published this comment allegedly supplied by a 20-something Iranian called Radin. About them hitting energy infrastructure, using an atomic bomb or leveling Iran, my honest reaction is that I'm okay with all of these. The first thing to say is that a comparable obscenity from a crazed British or US citizen eager to see the levelling of their country would, of course, never be published by any BBC journalist. Des Friedman, Professor of Media and Communications at Goldsmiths, University of London, commented, Iran has 90 million citizens, and yet the BBC manages to find one who claims to be okay with using nuclear weapons against his own country. There isn't a single reference in the entire story to the fact that the attacks are illegal and seen by many as war crimes. 7 hours after being published, following much public outrage, Radin's quote mysteriously disappeared from the BBC's article, replaced by a different comment from the same source. If attacking targets brings down the Islamic Republic, I'm fine with that. No correction or edit notice was attached at the time, highlighting the change. So what did Radin actually say? The first comment? The second? Both? Neither. Greyzone discussed the background of the BBC journalist responsible, casting serious doubt on her impartiality. BBC Persian has long been a notorious conduit for regime change propaganda. On 7 April, the BBC finally added an update to explain its vanishing quote. However, after further review, this part of the quote was removed from the article due to concerns over the way in which the speaker expressed his views and the extent to which they reflected wider Iranian viewpoints. This was meaningless verbiage that explained nothing.
Health Secretary Wes Streeting was asked whether destroying Iran's power stations and bridges would be a war crime. Reaching deep into his soul, Streeting replied, "Not my judgment to make." We like to feel that we give people a chance, that we are tolerant, open-minded, but we also think it's important to recognize the truth of Oscar Wilde's observation: it is only shallow people who do not judge by appearances. Voters need to be clear that plastic politicians like Streeting can be judged by the sociopathic blank look on their faces, our felt awareness that they are lacking humanity, compassion, and empathy is not mere imagination. We can all see and feel the soullessness of much of the labor hierarchy, notably the empty raincoat, Keir Starmer. To his credit, ITV News political editor Robert Peston expressed his deep exasperation and astonishment at Trump's appalling remarks on ending Iranian civilization, asking Starmer, "How did you feel about that? And how do you sustain a relationship with an American president who can say those things?" Starmer replied with his usual emotional vacuity, "Well, let me be really clear and blunt about this. They're not words that I would use or would ever use." NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte replied in similar fashion to Trump's genocidal threats. "When it comes to what leaders are saying, I'm not commenting on everything." Consider also the U.S. Senator and leading warmonger, Lindsey Graham. Glenn Greenwald has often commented on Graham's ghoulish delight in death and destruction. Look at the glee on Lindsey Graham's face as he talks about people dying. It is the only thing that seems to animate him, the only thing that makes him truly happy, the idea of more war and more people being killed. Graham likes to make comments of this kind on Iran. You either do a deal where you get out of the business you were in, or we're going to blow your stuff up that will allow you to function as a nation. That is your choice. In his classic book, The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness, psychotherapist Erich Fromm wrote, "Necrophilia in the characterological sense can be described as the passionate attraction to all that is dead, decayed, putrid, sickly. It is the passion to transform that which is alive into something unalive, to destroy for the sake of destruction, the exclusive interest in all that is purely mechanical. It is the passion to tear apart living structures." Fromm noted a coldness and deadness in the eyes of such people. Incapable of smiling authentically, their faces are rigid, unresponsive, limited to smirking. Fromm pointed to a specific type of hard or cruel mouth set in a permanent expression of distaste or contempt. All of these traits are clearly visible in Graham's appearance. A real problem is that these monsters can slip through to the highest echelons of politics, where they are mistaken for cool, emotionless, tough defenders of the national interest. In reality, they bring the death and destruction they crave even on their own nations. The Operation Eternal Darkness and the Ceasefire. With a nuclear holocaust apparently averted, on April 8, Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif announced a 2-week ceasefire between the United States and Iran. Quote,
With the greatest humility, I am pleased to announce that the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States of America, along with their allies, have agreed to an immediate ceasefire everywhere, including Lebanon and elsewhere, effective immediately." End quote. As this clearly stated, the ceasefire included Lebanon. Nevertheless, just hours later, Israel launched its most violent bombardment of Lebanon yet, killing at least 303 and wounding 1,100 by targeting, without warning, apartment blocks in residential areas of Beirut that had not previously been attacked, and also by attacking a funeral, cafes, emergency workers, and ambulances. Israel's name for the attack was Operation Eternal Darkness. Tucker Carlson, a devoted Christian, noted that eternal darkness appears numerous times in the New Testament as a reference to hell. The BBC's whitewashing response to this attempt to derail the ceasefire, quote, "Well, more now from Lebanon, where Israel says it's hit more than 100 Hezbollah command centers and military sites in 10 minutes, end quote. As we have commented before, Israel says is not journalism. Unusually, BBC Middle East correspondent Hugo Bashega posted a defense in response to criticism.
There is a clip circulating that misrepresents the way the Israeli attacks on Lebanon were covered by the BBC last night. This is the full segment. I'm out in Beirut interviewing people, so unable to do it by myself, but here's the introduction, my live, and my report. His report was sympathetic to the plight of Lebanese civilians, and it did quote the president of Lebanon describing the attacks as a massacre, but Bachega missed the point. The BBC would never introduce a report on a comparable atrocity by Russia, Iran, or any other official enemy with those countries' crude propaganda take on events. How to explain the extraordinary civility of the BBC in reporting on the crimes of a tiny foreign country of just 9 million people? Erin Bastani of Novara Media comments, "If they relay the facts accurately and objectively, there is a deluge of pressure from the Israel lobby, phone calls, emails, it's extraordinary and organized. This is the electric fence approach to media monitoring and management, as former Guardian reporter Nick Davies calls it. You disincentivize accuracy, or even just covering stories. Even the smallest thing gets a response, like a small shock from a fence. Producers know there are costs for covering Israel, so they calculate, let's leave it this time. It's not excusable, but it's explicable. For the BBC, which is public service journalism and which we all pay for, it's unacceptable." The destructive impacts of Israeli influence on British democracy go far beyond media flack. Israel and its supporters played a lead role in promoting the fake anti-Semitism smears that derailed Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party. This was a serious attack on British democracy that slammed the door on a more compassionate, people-centred politics, opening the way for Tory-light Keir Starmer and, consequently, the disastrous threat of a hard-right Reform Party government. Gideon Levy, who writes a weekly column for Israel's Haaretz newspaper, commented on the Corbyn smears in 2019. The Jewish establishment in Britain and the Israeli propaganda machine have taken out a contract on the leader of the British Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn. The contract was taken out a long time ago, and it was clear that the closer Corbyn came to being elected Prime Minister, the harsher the conflict would get. Political analyst Norman Finkelstein, whose mother survived the Warsaw Ghetto and the Majdanek concentration camp, and whose father was a survivor of both the Warsaw Ghetto and the Auschwitz concentration camp, said, "The British elites could not have gotten away with calling Corbyn an anti-Semite unless they had the support, the visible support, of all the leading Jewish organizations. You have to remember that during the summer, 25 July 2018,
all three major British publications, for the first time in British Jewish history, they all took out a common editorial denouncing Corbyn as an anti-Semite and saying that we're now standing on the verge of another Holocaust. They are the enablers of this concerted conspiracy by the whole of British elite society to destroy Jeremy Corbyn. Humanizing Iran. While sociopaths had their say in response to Trump's threat that Iran would shortly die as a civilization, something wonderful also happened. There was a global tsunami of revulsion and rejection. The threat stirred the humanity even in voices on the hard right. The Mirror described Trump as a maniac, and the Daily Mail described his threats as unhinged, and they were joined by all kinds of voices from across the political spectrum. That is positive. If Trump repeats the threat, the response will be louder still. Additionally, we saw and reposted numerous videos on X humanizing Iranians. Notably, this video of ordinary people in Tehran, people who look exactly like the rest of us, challenged decades of Western propaganda depicting grim-faced Iranian women in black burqas walking past skull-packed propaganda murals demonizing America. The video has had 5.3 million views and 52,000 likes. Posting a beautiful image of Iranian architecture, Dr. Rhonda Garab wrote on X, "Trump's done what no tourism campaign could, sparked huge interest in Persian culture, posts on history, architecture, food, music, Lego videos going viral. The hatred we've been fed about Iran for decades rapidly transformed into support and respect." And from Gaza, Maha Hosseini posted a beautiful, all but silent 34-second video that somehow said so much.
"Here I have stood at the peak of fear and felt the deepest peace. Good night from Gaza." Despite all the madness, horror, and killing, Trump's genocidal threat provoked a display of deep-seated solidarity and compassion that defied decades of propaganda demonizing the Iranian people as animals, savages, and primitives. Clearly, very few of us are willing to tolerate the threat of nuclear genocide. In these grim times, when it sometimes feels like humanity has completely lost its way, that is something to celebrate. David Edwards is the author of A Short Book About Ego and the Remedy of Meditation, Mantra Books, available here. He is also the author of the science fiction novel The Man with No Face, to be published by Roundfire Books in 2026.